Welcome back. Chinese President Xi Jinping wrapped up a landmark visit to Malaysia, expressing strong commitment to deepening bilateral ties and advancing a high-level strategic partnership, or at least that's what he wants. Now, with 31 agreements signed and a clear focus on future-facing sectors, this visit marks a significant moment in China-Malaysia relations at this point. Now, to unpack what this all means to all of us, we're joined by DARRYL, Associate Director at BowerGroupAsia. DARRYL, thank you very much for doing this and for joining us. Now, Xi Jinping just left town. What stood out to you the most from the visit or his visit to Malaysia? DARRYL?
Thanks, Gerard. So I think it's important in this context that the timing of the visit was extremely important, right? So while the visit by Xi Jinping was several months in the making, it so happened to coincide, just a few weeks after the announcement of global tariffs by the Trump administration, which affected all countries equally. So I think what stood out the most is that China and Malaysia sought to assure each other, and in the process also assure the region of the continued defense of multilateral approaches and free trade regimes. They assured each other of the continued commitment to the rules-based world order that they've been very used to so far, right? And also China used this opportunity amidst global uncertainty to highlight its commitment to its shared prosperity model for the region, in which it positions itself as a consistent and reliable geopolitical partner, not just to Malaysia, but to the region as well, and in a way contrasting itself against the approach taken by the US in recent weeks.
Now, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but this tour included Vietnam, Malaysia, and now Cambodia. Why do you think China picked these three countries and in that order?
So I wouldn't ascribe a particular significance to the order that these countries were visited. But it is known that China has significant infrastructure investments in both Vietnam and Cambodia. In terms of Malaysia, I think it's also a lot more significant, not just in terms of diplomatic relations, but also as Malaysia's own specific role, right? So Malaysia's chair for ASEAN this year, and will also be hosting ASEAN +3 meetings in which China will be coming to Malaysia as well in the coming months. But not only that, it's also in a way reciprocating towards Anwar's visit. He visited China 3 times in the past 2 years, and this was also a way of acknowledging the commitment of the two countries, between the two countries, right? And thirdly, it's also important to note that Malaysia also subscribed itself as a partner to the BRICS, of which China is a major player within the organization. So there are a lot of reasons for Xi Jinping to prioritize Malaysia as one of its stopovers within his tour of ASEAN.
Now, in Malaysia, we saw 31 agreements signed so far since President Xi landed in Malaysia. A lot of them touched on trade, technology or tech and infrastructure. From your point of view, which of these matters most for us or most for Malaysians right now?
Definitely it would have to be in the digital sector, where we signed 2 MOUs, one on artificial intelligence and another on digital economy. And the reason why this is so important is because Malaysia seeks to position itself as an AI leader for the region in the coming decade or so. We seek to set both regulatory standards for the region as well as become a regional hub for AI-related industries. And it's very important then to leverage on China's expertise and know-how, where their own fintech sector and digital economy sector has kind of exploded in the past decade or so, learning from them and what they've done right within their own country and where we can then learn from these best practices. So if you also look at the digital economy sector, where we've also set targets we aim to achieve a 25.5% contribution to GDP by the digital economy by the end of this year. It's also very important then to leverage on China's know-how and best practices, and just in general, the trade between the two countries in this region. I think also, go ahead.
Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Don't let me stop you.
I think just very quickly on the idea on the MOUs on trade, where we signed, I think, 3 or so MOUs on that, including an MOU on industrial parks. It's also very important because right now we have US as the second largest export market for Malaysia. And it's important then for Malaysia to kind of diversify its risk in export markets, given the volatility that the US is experiencing in this current moment. Yeah.
Right. If you're just joining us on the program, we're currently speaking to DARRYL Tan. He's the Associate Director at BowerGroupAsia, helping us unpack President Xi Jinping's visit to Malaysia and what that means to Malaysians and also to people around the world at this point. You know, it's become a world story now. Xi's visit also touched on cooperation in areas like digital economy. He also talked about AI, that's been talked about a lot, and green energy. From a policy point of view, how ready is Malaysia to work closely with China in these, of course, we know as fast-moving sectors? DARRYL?
So I think we are very well positioned to work closely with China because this is also not the first time that we are interacting with China on these issues. I think there's already very strong relations, pre-existing relations between the relevant ministries from both countries. So we're very well positioned. I'll give you one example, and that example, for example, is in the fintech sector, where in the past few years, we've established very strong interoperability in terms of payment systems. We have interoperable cross-border QR system payments between the two countries, and has helped facilitate a lot of trade and tourism and education between the two countries as well.
Right. With what we're seeing, and I don't know if this next question is within your lane, but there's a lot of attention on how Malaysia deals with both China and the West. Do you think we're managing that balance well, or are there signs of strain at this point, especially as Malaysia sits on the chair of ASEAN this year in 2025?
That's a good question. I think as far as we're concerned, we are striking the balance relatively well given the heightened geopolitical tensions. Now, Trump has publicly disclosed his suspicions on China's motives during his ASEAN tour, right? And he has framed this China's motives as trying to fight back against US influence in the region. Now, given this sort of heightened suspicions between the two countries and how they're retaliating on tariffs, the Malaysian government has maintained its neutrality in the matter, which is very vital because as an open export-based economy, we really can't afford to take sides on this issue. And therefore, it's also important to show to both countries and for the rest of the world, in fact, that we remain open for business. So I'll give you a very quick example, right? So even though we have during Xi's visit, we have committed ourselves to enhancing economic ties with China. At the same time, just 2 weeks back, we've also ruled out reciprocal tariffs against the US. We've also publicly declared that we're open to negotiating these tariffs. So what we're sending a signal to both countries is that we are trying our very level best to maintain both good relations with both of them and not taking sides, explicit sides with either of these parties. And you're trying to maintain our neutrality in this issue.
Now, beyond the headlines, what should Malaysians be paying attention to after this visit, especially in areas like AI, green energy, and finance?
So I'll quickly take up on the finance issue. As I mentioned, the interoperability in payment systems has also contributed a lot towards tourism for both countries, right? China was one of our major tourism markets in the past year. That was also due to reciprocal visa relaxations for tourists between the two countries. And what we've done is we've extended that visa-free travel to all the way to 2026. And China has reciprocated that by allowing Malaysians to travel to China visa-free. So given that tourism is such a large market for us as well, and especially in the post-COVID era, I think it's also important for us to keep a close eye on the tourism sector and try to leverage on that. More Chinese tourists coming into the country and leveraging on their entry into the country to boost our GDP in that sector as well.
Right, DARRYL, and finally, if we look ahead, if you were advising or if you are advising policymakers here, what would you say we should be watching or doing next after this one high-profile visit to Malaysia?
Well, if I were a policymaker, I'll definitely be trying to frame Malaysia as not particularly taking sides with China. I think that's something which the West will be prone to do. But really framing Malaysia as a country which remains open to trade investments from all countries and not wanting to take sides in geopolitical tensions. And you've talked about our ASEAN chairmanship earlier, and this is something that policymakers should also be extending to the regional, ASEAN as a region, because ASEAN, just like Malaysia, doesn't try to take sides in geopolitical tensions. We believe it's in the best interest, not only for our country, but as the region, to remain neutral and to continue pressing for amicable solutions in geopolitical tensions. This also means that policymakers need to press for regional solutions to continue dialogues with not only China and the US, but also with major trading partners in the region, such as Japan, South Korea, as well as the EU.
Right. So what you're saying is actually echoing what Anwar Ibrahim usually says. Malaysia is fiercely independent and she should stay fiercely independent. Thank you very much, Darryl.
Thank you.
Darryl Tan, Associate Director at BowerGroupAsia. I'm off to another quick break. We'll be back with more updates. This is The World on Bernama TV. Stay with us.